Okay, hello again. This is a Lesson 3 video GCE Edexcel paper for Buddhism video on introducing the idea of the acts of the Buddha. The story of the Buddha as we know it dates back to perhaps the best source is a book called the Buddha Charat. Probably pronounced it wrong, never mind, that dates back to about the 2nd century AD. In fact, the Buddha's life dates 600-700 years before that, to 2,500 years ago. And so this is the first biography, the first full-length biography of the Buddha. And it's an epic, dramatized poem from the 1st or 2nd century by this Indian poet called Ashvaghosha. Now, the commentator Dominic Side in his book talks about the 10 acts of the Buddha. Some others talk about 12 acts and some less. It doesn't really matter how many acts. 10 is a useful number to think about, what we're going to work with. And so this is an introduction to the first, to all of the acts, but we'll split them up into the first 6 or 7, then the next couple and the last couple. So, scholars disagree, and it's important you realize this, about all kinds of things to do with the life of the Buddha. And for Buddhists, it doesn't really matter so much the actual historical life, because it's his teaching that's more important. The exact dates perhaps can vary a lot. The commonly accepted date is about 563 to 483 BCE. But even then, there's a sort of range of scholarship on that from modern scholars. What do we know? This is a picture from Dominic Side. It's quite a useful one. It shows you where he lived. His home was Kapilavastu in the foothills of the Himalayas, north of the Ganges basin. The river Ganges to the south of Kapilavastu, in present-day Nepal. So he spent his childhood in Kapilavastu, and he attained enlightenment there, in modern-day Bogana, India. And you can see some of the other places we'll talk about later. In particular, notice this area called the Shakya area, which is his family tribe, and the next door tribe or kingdom called the Kosala tribe, and then next the Magadha area. Really important, because that's where they discovered iron ore and all that stuff we did in previous lessons on the economic and historical and social side of the change from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. And some of these other important places here that he visited. And we're not talking a huge area, a couple of 100 kilometers, easily within walking distance. His life really didn't cover that big an area. His first teaching was in Sarnath. If we go back to that map again, Sarnath is just down here on the map. It's not mentioned there, but it's just down here. And his first teaching, and we can date, everyone agrees, is this place called the Deer Park in Sarnath, and today it's a sort of World Heritage place. And of course it's the Four Noble Truths, the key teaching, the most basic teaching of Buddhism that he delivers there. And then following that, 45 years, we think, although his age when he dies varies, some say 80, some say 90, and these next 45 years he gathers disciples, he wanders around the villages and towns of the Ganges basin. And then, age perhaps 80, he passes away at Krusenia. Now we can find Krusenia on our map again. It's not quite there. Never mind, I'll have to look for it now. Oh, there it is, Krusenia. And here we can see the temple of Krusenia, that has this statue of the Buddha's lying down, his Parnivya. So by the 80 he dies, and so it's relatively small, the geographical area, And his influence during his lifetime would have been really quite localized. So like we said, the Buddha Charya from about the 2nd century is the first major compendium of his work. But there are other biographies that start to develop in the centuries following that. And in particularly when the influence of Mahayana Buddhism, it's very interesting how they are developed. Some include even more miraculous details. They become embellished, they become, and so on. But the story, the retelling of the life of the Buddha is really an evangelistic track. It was used by Ashoka and others, that's telling the story of the Buddha, to simply introduce basic Buddhist teachings. What we know about the Buddha precedes these texts, though, because it can go back to the Tipitaka. The oldest information in the Pali Canon is quite there, but it's not recounted chronologically like a New Testament gospel. It has to be pieced together, and even at that, it's a bit of a mosaic. And what we find is that the Pali Canon, we know exactly when it was put together. It was just before Jesus, 30 years before Jesus, 29 BCE. But that's still 4 odd years after the life of the Buddha. 400, 500 years of oral tradition. And following the Buddha, there were at least 18 different schools of Buddhism, perhaps as many as 30, and they all retold the basic stories of Buddhism in slightly different ways. And they begin to be written down, hence this vast collection, the Tipitaka, of Buddhist texts from all these different schools of Buddhism. In order then to simplify this vast compendium, the life of the Buddha is exactly that, a simplification of the basic teaching of Buddhism, a simple introduction to Buddhism. And so this idea of the acts of the Buddha developed, and the guy who started this idea, this guy Ashvagosha, okay, in the 2nd century, is key. Now, did he create 10? Did he create 12? Doesn't really matter. Acts. The conception, the physical birth, the accomplishment and worldly skills, his youth, pleasure, life of pleasure and indulgence, leaving the palace, life as an ascetic, victory over Mara, enlightenment, spreading the teaching of death, or passing away. This is how Dominic Side groups it. I think 10 is a useful number to remember. And that's the key idea. It is just a method of remembering the most basic teaching of Buddhism, and to illustrate and give understanding to the basic teachings of Buddhism. What's key here is that he was just a human being, but a human being that we can follow, we can imitate. And again, from an academic point of view, we just don't know what happened, what was a historical event, what's legend. But we can make educated guesses. Most agree they existed. Probably many of the events said happened, and so on. So follow up in the next few videos. We'll go through some of these events. So we'll look in a video of the conception, the physical birth, the accomplishment and worldly skills, his youth, life of pleasure indulgent, leaving the palace, and life as an ascetic. So this is the early part of his life, before his enlightenment. We'll be doing videos on, and then in the next lesson we'll group the last few events, the victory over Mara, enlightenment in one lesson, and the spreading the teaching and parnivia, or death or passing away, in another. Tune in again.